Hi folks, welcome back. In this video I want to talk about some more examples of irreducible complexity. And I introduced this in the last video, but just to remind you, irreducible complexity means that the sum of all the parts or subunits or components of a system are all needed together in their entirety at the same time for a system to function. Sorry, got a scratch there. Without the sum of all the parts working together, the system can't function. So a gradual accumulation of these parts does an organism no good. They cannot function independently, so they're useless on their own. All the parts are equally necessary, so they must all arise at and be present together at the same time, or the system cannot function. Therefore, you cannot remove a subunit or a component from the system, or develop the system by gradually developing the subunits or components, because all of them are required together and simultaneously. For example, if you remove the transmission or the fuel or the wheels from a car, the car can't operate. And so therefore, evolution has another problem. How can different subunits that would arise gradually, randomly, and independently know not only their own structural needs and function, but also the structural needs to interact with and function in concert with the other subunits before any of them even exist? How can evolution create systems that have subunits that are able to fit and align with all the other subunits so they can work in concert to create a functioning system when the subunits all arise gradually, randomly, and independently? And I'll save you the suspense of the answer here, because it can't. Randomness, the basis of evolution, simply cannot account for irreducible complexity. Therefore, irreducible complexity is a death sentence for evolution. Randomness and a gradual accumulation of parts would prevent life from occurring, because it would prevent the possibility of the essential functions of systems like that found in molecular biology, since it cannot account for irreducible complexity. The fact is, evolution has no answer for irreducible complexity, and there are countless examples of it throughout life. They are not isolated incidents. They're commonplace. In fact, they're an integral part of life. Now, I already mentioned how the system of molecular biology and the bacterial flagellum are examples of irreducible complexity. But other examples include yaks, sea snakes, the pressure handling adaptations of fish that exist at great depths, the giraffe, the human eye, the breathing mechanisms of marine mammals, and on and on and on. And one of my favorites, the amazing woodpecker. The anatomy of a woodpecker is unlike that of any other bird. For example, woodpeckers have two design features that help them stabilize themselves while moving and drilling on a vertical tree trunk. First, they have two X-shaped feet with two toes pointing forward and two toes pointing backwards. Most birds have three toes pointing forward and only one pointing backwards. This enables woodpeckers to move up, down, and around vertical tree trunks without falling off. Second, woodpeckers have uniquely designed tail feathers that act as a tripod, along with their 2 feet, to help support them while moving and drilling on a vertical tree trunk. And now their amazing anatomy is really on display when you look at the design of their head, neck, and beak. Woodpeckers have chisel-tipped beaks that can peck at an unbelievably fast pace. A woodpecker can drill into wood by hammering its beak at a speed of 16 times per second, which is 960 pecks per minute. And I'm not an expert on this, but I read that this rate is about twice as fast as the firing rate of a machine gun. Not only that, a woodpecker's head moves at twice the speed of a bullet, with the velocity of its head being 1,300 miles per hour upon impact with a tree. Folks, this bird's head is really moving when it drills into a tree trunk. Pecking at wood with such power and velocity would kill any other bird, but not woodpeckers. To prevent their beaks and heads from being crushed, not to mention whiplash, concussion, or cervical dislocation, woodpeckers have an industrial strength beak, a bone-reinforced cartilage-padded skull, and superior strength neck and head muscles. The neck muscles enable perfect alignment of the neck and skull while drilling, while specialized muscles in the head pull the brain away from the beak every time it impacts a tree. The bone-reinforced skull is separated from the beak by a sponge-like cartilage that's widely recognized as better shock-absorbing material than anything man has ever created, as opposed to other birds that have their beak fused to their skull. And to provide you with some insight as to how amazing this specialized cartilage is, the sudden impact and abrupt halting of a woodpecker's head and skull every time it strikes a tree trunk is equivalent to 1,000 xg. That's 1,000 times the force of gravity. And before I move on, you have to understand the significance of this extreme head-banging number. There's 3 kinds of g-forces. Each one depends on the direction of its acceleration, and therefore the direction of the g-force, because force equals mass times acceleration. There's front to back, side to side, or head to toe, which is also, the last one's also called negative g-forces. The head-to-head, or the negative g-forces, are the hardest to withstand because blood pools in our lower bodies and our brains don't get enough oxygen. So these are the g-forces that people cannot withstand for very long periods of time. The other ones can be tolerated better, but still not in excess. And give me some examples here. A sneeze can generate 2.9 Gs. A slap in the back, about 4.1 Gs. And if you plop down into a chair, it can generate 10.1 Gs. But none of these last very long, so it's not so problematic. But in 1954, there was a crazy doctor named John Stapp. He built a rocket-propelled sled that accelerated and stopped so fast that he experienced and survived a record-breaking front-to-back G-force of 46.2 Gs. But the key was that it only lasted for a second or two. And that, I believe, is still the world record. But typically, people cannot withstand any G-forces in that range. And for some other examples, astronauts aboard the space shuttle pull about 3 Gs while they're lifting off. Well, the best roller coasters generally top out at 4 or 5 Gs. Military and acrobatic pilots regularly pull 4 Gs during maneuvers, which can increase to 6 Gs during some of the more difficult maneuvers. While wearing G suits, they can reach as many as 8 or 9 Gs. Anything beyond 8 is very difficult to tolerate for any length of time because, well, as you say, the book states that the safest amount of G's a person can pull is 9. And with these kind of numbers here, we're talking about the head to toe or the negative G forces. The most G's that an F-15 has ever pulled is estimated to be between 30 and 40. The plane's frame was so severely bent that the wing skin crinkled from the stress. Now, all of that to say, in comparison, the woodpecker's beak, skull, brain, and neck can withstand the force of 1,000 Gs. So, folks, this value is simply astonishing. Woodpeckers also have slit-like nostrils. Not only are they unusually narrow, but they're also covered in very fine, wiry feathers. These two features prevent sawdust from entering their air passages while they drill, which would cause them to choke. Woodpeckers also have extra long tongues that can be stretched 5 times its normal length, and they're rooted in their nostrils. Unlike most birds that have their tongues rooted in the back of their beaks. Their tongues are so long that they're housed in a canal that keeps the tongue wrapped around their head when it's not in use. Their tongues also have glands that secrete a glue-like substance that sticks to insects. Nerve endings that are so sensitive that it can determine the identity of what it's sticking to, and rear-facing barbs that secure their prey until it's retracted into their mouth. All these specialized characteristics, which are numerous, and there's more I didn't go through, are essential to the survival of a woodpecker. All these unique structural design features must work in a coordinated effort and are essential for the success of the woodpecker. Therefore, they must have developed at the same time, and they represent another example of irreducible complexity. The anatomy of a woodpecker simply cannot be explained by evolution. And I want to stress this. I want you to think about the features of a woodpecker's anatomy for a moment. If each of them evolved gradually over long periods of time, woodpeckers cannot survive, and they would no longer be with us. A bird with that amount of strength in its beak and not in its skull would crush the skull when it tried to peck on a tree with that much force, and vice versa. A bird without the shock-absorbing cartilage between its beak and skull would die from brain trauma upon just one impact at 1,300 miles per hour, as his beak was driven out through the back of its brain and right out through the back of its skull. A bird without the muscles in its head that secure the brain every time it hammers on a tree trunk would die from brain trauma upon just one impact at 1,300 miles per hour. A bird without the specialized neck muscles would die from cervical dislocation upon just one impact at 1,300 miles per hour. A bird without the specialized design of its feet and tail feathers would not be able to move about a vertical tree trunk or maintain its position on the tree trunk while it was hammering, much less be able to maintain its position while it was just sitting there. A bird that feeds the way a woodpecker does would starve to death without that long of a tongue, or without the other specialized features of its tongue. These specialized anatomical features scream of irreducible complexity and intelligent design. All these features, along with the many genes required to create all these features, must have always been present in woodpeckers in order for them to exist and survive. There's no other explanation. A woodpecker doesn't work without all these features functioning together from day one, and evolution cannot account for that. The number of gain-of-function mutations, which I'll discuss in a future video, required to add all the new genes necessary to create and add all these new and unique features, in addition to the fact that all of them are absolutely required to randomly appear simultaneously, all of that is virtually impossible to calculate. But woodpeckers aren't the only example of this dilemma for evolution. Such examples exist everywhere. They're all around us. As numerous as the number of species of animals and plants that exists throughout our world. Here's another one. Consider the olive sea snake. Olive sea snakes have nostrils that can close, enabling these snakes to hold their breath and remain submerged for up to 90 minutes while diving to depths of 130 feet. Their tails are flattened like an oar or a tail fin on a fish, which is used to propel the snake through the water like a fish. The scales on their tails are covered in photoreceptors that can detect flashes of light, like that created by the sparkle of a fish scale when it hits the light. Therefore, the olive sea snake can literally see fish swim with its tail, which aids in its ability to completely hide from predators. The ventral side, the underbelly of the olive sea snake, lacks the long ventral scales that run across the underbelly of terrestrial snakes. These ventral scales are essential for motion on land. However, with the exception of only one genus, the Laticauda, all sea snakes either lack ventral scales or they're so reduced in size that they're indistinguishable from their other scales. This is because their body plan is flattened along a vertical axis, like a fish, as opposed to being flattened along a horizontal axis, like a snake that lives on land. The body design of an olive sea snake, as for all sea snakes, is so different from a typical land snake that they can't even crawl on land. And again, the only exception to this is the genus Laticauda, the sea crate. They are completely designed for life in the water. All these essential adaptations of the olive sea snake and the new genetic information required to encode all these adaptations must exist simultaneously for them to survive. As with the woodpecker, this is yet another example of irreducible complexity. The gradual accumulation of mutations through evolution cannot account for the existence of the olive sea snake. And what about yaks? Yaks are the highest grazing animals on the planet, living high in the Himalayas, where the air is very thin at the heights in which they live. Winter temperatures where they live are routinely 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. And summer temperatures barely get above freezing long enough for the grass they live on to grow. Yet they not only survive in these extreme conditions, yaks actually thrive in them. Yaks are of the same genus as cattle, the genus Bos. Yet when compared to other cattle, yaks exhibit many differences. For example, they have shorter legs and smaller ears. Yaks have long, thick coats of shaggy hair that can reach down to the ground with a dense, woolly undercoat of insulation. They have a thick layer of subcutaneous fat and virtually no sweat glands. Their tails are long and much more like that of a horse. The female udders and the male scrotum are both small and covered in hair. Yaks also have significantly larger lungs and a significantly larger heart, which both function to improve oxygen transport throughout their body, a necessity for life in areas where the air is very thin. Their rumen is also significantly larger, enabling them to ferment their food longer and extract more nutrients, which allows them to survive on food that has lower nutritional value than that of other cattle. And when you consider that cattle living in Africa experience the complete opposite extremes of a yak, you quickly realize that neither would be able to survive in the other's environment. For example, yaks will suffer heat exhaustion above 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Therefore, every adaptational feature that each type of cattle requires to survive in their own extreme environment must have been present from day one. The existence of yaks and their African cattle cousins are another example of irreducible complexity, because neither of them can be explained in terms of evolution and a gradual accumulation of all the features required for their existence. Folks, I could keep doing this for a long, long time because, like I said, there are countless examples of irreducible complexity in life all around us. And I'll tell you about some more of them in future videos. But in the interest of time, I'm going to end this video here. But come on back for the next one. And if you like what you hear, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, we'll leave the light on for you.